taught, I'm going to be by the computers.
Sorry, Josh.
No, it's all right. Just looking for.
No one cares.
I'm used to this, like, being at
Mr. Arthur, what do you think?
Yeah.
If people could
No,
get
it was.
settled down, that would be great. We have a very busy program. I guess our first order of business is that we want to be able to take some pictures. Is that okay with everyone?
They're not being posted the whole time.
No, where are they being posted?
Probably just on our website.
Probably on the missions website.
Yeah, I think it primarily.
Welcome everybody to our discussion on neurodiversity. This is the first of a series that we're hoping to present. So I'm sure we'll have much more to say about this. This event is being put on by the Collaborative Reform Group, which is also known as CRG, It's a working group of the Commission on Disability, the Human Rights Committee, and town departments and residents. We're always looking for new members, and if you're interested in becoming a member, please see Stephanie. Stephanie right here, over there, afterwards. My name is Victoria Buckley, and I chair the Commission on Disability for the town and co-chair the CRG. And I also work as a psychiatric occupational therapist in a large Boston emergency room and also at a private psychiatric hospital. Tonight we will talk about neurodiversity, what it means and what it doesn't mean. To many people, neurodiversity refers to a disorder, something that needs to be fixed, somehow not normal. This evening, we are going to challenge that illness model and talk about being neurodiverse affirming instead. This means that we can define neurodivergent conditions to be normal, natural conditions or variations in the human condition. This is a change from the medical model, where medical pathology needs something to be cured. Indeed, neurodiversity is seen as an integral part of the person, and attempts to cure it are actually detrimental to mental health. We need to understand neurodiversity and support individuals through their challenges and make accommodations for their needs. Neurodivergence is not a character flaw, but rather it represents a plethora of distinct brain styles. We need to empower individuals to recognize their strengths, to navigate their challenges, and make personal adjustments. We often hear about neurodiversity being a spectrum, as in they are on the spectrum. The spectrum is not linear, but it's more circular, and needs to be perceived as being very broadly ranged. Many experts say that we are all on the spectrum, with individual challenges and strengths. Neurodiversity is poorly understood, and people are often not receiving the help that they need. I see a huge gap in emergency services for people turning 22 in crisis in the emergency room, and there's just not enough neurodiverse affirming treatment available. And we need to break down the stigma so we can learn and grow and be more inclusive. On the spectrum means a wide variety of behaviors that can range from significant challenges with everyday tasks to having unique perspectives and exceptional skills in specific areas. Autism and other neurodiverse conditions are not illnesses needing a cure, but individuals may need support to navigate a society that works better for the so-called neurotypical. Some of the myths are very stigmatizing. So let's be clear that vaccines do not cause it, that neurodiverse people don't lack empathy, that it is not a disease state, and that they do feel emotions, and that they're not more violent than other people. Neurodiversity affirming recognizes that differences in how people think, learn, and process information are natural and not deficits that need fixing. Let's strive for acceptance, not just awareness. Let's acknowledge that neurodivergent people navigate through a world designed for the neurotypical, and that can be very challenging. Let's fight our own internalized ableism, bias, and be more understanding and welcome the diversity of life. The format this evening will be a presentation by the Turing Alliance, a look at the challenges and parents and caregivers face with time for questions and answers, and a look at some of our resources in Lexington. We are very grateful to welcome the Turing Alliance. They're kind of rock stars around here because they were in the Boston Globe. They're a Lexington High School group club, and they're going to share their experiences and information to help us gain a better understanding of neurodiversity. So let's welcome them.
Okay. Hi, I'm Cade Redeker. I am a speech-language pathologist for Lexington High School, as well as the advisor for the Turing Alliance and the chair for the Neurodiversity SHAC, or Student Health Advisory Council. I'm here to introduce the Turing Alliance before they give their presentation, so I'm going to point at each of you, have you say your name and your grade, and then we'll get started, all right? So first off, we actually have an alumni. Julia.
I'm Emma and I'm a senior.
I'm Francesca and I'm a sophomore.
I'm Cushy and I'm a freshman.
I'm Michael and I'm a sophomore.
Ryan and I'm a senior.
Awesome. Well, we will get started. I think you each have a microphone at your table, so perfect. And without further ado, go ahead, Michael.
So, we are, as mentioned, the LHS Turing Alliance, and we wanted to present to you how neurodivergence is especially impactful in school as well as just in general in life. So, firstly, why the Turing Alliance, and why choose Alan Turing, the namesake of our alliance? He was the person who created the first computer. It was used in World War II to break the Enigma code, and he is just generally seen as a very large symbol of neurodiversity and neurodivergence, as from all accounts that we have of him, we suspect that he was on the autism spectrum, as well as possibly having ADHD, and he passed away when he was only 42, so we thought that it would be a good way to honor him and his name and his legacy by creating this club that affirms neurodiversity and neurodivergence and helps teach people more about it. So, to get started, it would be useful to define some terms, neurodiversity and neurodivergence. So, neurodiversity is a wide range and mix of different ways in which brains can function. It is a property of a population that everybody's brain is unique and different, and they can vary to different degrees. So this does not just include ADHD or autism. This includes many different things, including panic disorders and conditions, syndromes like Tourette's and tics, autism and ADHD, as mentioned, as well as obsessive compulsive disorder. It can include anxiety and depression, as well as developmental coordination disorders, dyslexia, dyscalculia, and dysgraphia, bipolar disorder conditions, and many other things. Just generally, neurodivergent describes cognitive traits that fall outside of the norm, versus neurotypical is a category for traits that fall within the norm, what is generally accepted. But what this means is that neurotypical individuals may experience similar struggles to those as neurodivergent people. They might just not to the same extent or in different contexts.
So there are many different presentations of neurodivergence. Oftentimes, neurodivergent people are over or under-responsive to sensory stimuli. Things like smells, tastes, sounds, visual environment, and textures can all be experienced differently by neurodivergent people. Neurodivergent people sometimes have a difficult time self-regulating, which is the process by which we can recognize and control our emotions and behaviors. Their regulation is often linked to their stimulation, which means that when someone is over or understimulated, self-regulating becomes a lot more difficult. Auditory processing disorder is a form of neurodivergence and also comorbid with many other forms of neurodivergence. It involves delayed or impaired mental processing of auditory signals. Synesthesia is also a sensory processing neurotype, where two or more senses are linked. Executive function is the collection of mental processes that allow us to plan, organize, and remember instructions and tasks, impulse control, and more. A lot of neurodivergent people have executive dysfunction, so the lack of these traits. This leads to difficulty controlling impulses and staying organized, as well as task paralysis, which we'll go over later, and hyperfocus, where a person becomes extremely focused on a topic or task, sometimes outside of their control. Motor control is the process by which us initiate and direct our movement. Many neurodivergent people experience apraxia, which is the inability to control fine motor movement. A lot of people experience trouble controlling strength and coordination. Another common symptom of neurodivergence is tics. Tics are involuntary and repetitive muscular movements. Stimming is a self-regulatory process that involves a repeated behavior. Everyone stims, not only neurodivergent people. If any of you are bouncing your leg right now or clicking your pen, that's stimming. And we're not calling you out on it. Stimming is often more intense and frequent in neurodivergent individuals because it allows them to self-regulate. For example, someone might flap their hands when they're nervous or excited, rock back and forth while concentrating, crack their knuckles all the time, and a lot more. Social communication. Neurodivergent people often socialize differently than neurotypical people. Differences in voice tone, like volume or inflection, are common in neurodivergent individuals. Many neurodivergent people also struggle with eye contact or using the correct body language for a given situation. This causes a barrier in communication because the ways that neurodivergent people socialize are often perceived as rude or weird. For example, someone might perceive a neurodivergent person's tone as aggressive or their facial expression as upset, when in reality they are not meant to be. Another common pattern of communication among neurodivergent people is infodumping. This is when a person shares a large amount of information about a highly focused subject. This is related to the tendency to have a special interest or hyper-focus on a specific topic. Many neurodivergent people show empathy towards others by relating that person's experiences to their own. This is sometimes perceived as self-centered, but is actually a way of showing that they comprehend the situation that is being presented enough to relate to it. For example, upon hearing that a friend's pet passed away, a neurodivergent person might relate a similar experience of their own to show that they empathize and understand. Finally, literal processing of language is neurodivergent people struggle with subtext or reading between the lines or interpreting language, very literally and precisely rather than inferring what someone means. So what is autism? The autism spectrum disorder is an adult developmental condition characterized by differences in brain function. It can be caused by a variety of factors, including genetics. Other causes are unknown. ASD affects behavior and communication and can make it difficult to understand and conform to neurotypical expectations. ASD can also affect how someone learns and interacts with their environment. It's important to keep in mind that there are many traits associated with autism, so we can present differently to different people. A helpful way to represent this visually is with an autism wheel. Each way represents an autistic person, and each category represents how strongly they represent that specific trait. For example, one autistic person might present with very high noise sensitivity and special interest, but less social difficulty and aggression. It differs from person to person. What is ADHD? Attention deficit / hyperactivity disorders caused by dysfunction in the brain dopamine system. This leads to difficulty with executive function, regulating attention and filtering incoming stimuli. This regulation is not the lack of focus or attention, but it means that people with ADHD often can't direct their attention where it is expected or needed. In one situation, it might be extremely difficult to focus, and then another, they might experience intense periods of concentration. ADHD is generally categorized into 3 subtypes: hyperactive, inattentive, and combined.
No, next.
Some other neurodivergent conditions are obsessive compulsive disorder, known as OCD, which is characterized by recurring thoughts and fears which lead to repetitive behaviors. And these thoughts and behaviors are unwanted and are the source of stress for people with OCD. Another one is Tourette syndrome, which is characterized by tics, which are involuntary movements and sounds. and dyslexia, which is characterized by affecting abilities to learn stuff, such as reading, writing, and math.
Okay, so now we must go over how all this, what we talked about earlier and what we will talk about later, impacts one's daily life. So we'll go over some terms that you'll need to know. So masking is the intentional hiding of neurodivergent traits in order to seem neurotypical, but it can have many detrimental effects. It is both exhausting mentally and physically because it can cause some neurodivergent people to lose sense of identity as they are unable to tell which traits are theirs and which ones have been forced upon them. Some people don't even know they're masking and might find themselves completely tired at the end of the day without even knowing why. Because neurodivergent people are expected to mask in a lot of social situations, some people might avoid socializing and isolate themselves because masking is so tiring. And because one is focused on masking, it can decrease their situational awareness, in fact. And because it makes the person seem more neurotypical, others do not recognize or do not believe their neurodivergence. It might seem like someone doesn't have any symptoms like the ones we mentioned, when in reality they're just really good at hiding it. To this end, terms like high functioning can be detrimental because they are used to discredit those who seek help, as their issues are perceived as easy to deal with. I'm asking, one of them is listening behavior because listening behavior because when somebody is focused on masking, they're not actually listening, and this can also be detrimental when it comes to even interacting with other neurodivergent people, because some people know how to mask better than others. And listening behavior, back to listening behavior, this refers to the body language that conventionally signals to others that you are paying attention. You're probably told to sit still and face forward, make eye contact with the presenter, nod your head, and more. Because neurodivergent people often struggle with body language, it can be very difficult for them to display these signals, even when they are paying attention. In fact, it can be very detrimental to a person's attention span and ultimately their learning, because as they are more focused on presenting listening behavior than rather actually paying attention. Some things that commonly help people pay attention are drawing, doodling, stimming, or focusing on one point. In fact, a lot of people present these behaviors while paying attention, but neurodivergent people tend to display them more strongly. While these might look like someone is zoned out or not paying attention, it's often a sign that they're making an effort to understand. And one of the major things about listening behavior is eye contact. Eye contact can be difficult, even physically uncomfortable for neurodivergent people. It's something that is going to come naturally for neurotypical people, but neurodivergent people often default to not making eye contact. And it is and while it's expected in America, some cultures don't even make eye contact. And which shows that it is not necessary for effective communication. Sometimes people need help learning to advocate themselves regarding eye contact. Communication can be tricky for anyone, especially when two people have different styles of communicating. Neurodivergent people often communicate emotions and intentions differently than neurotypical people. This includes things like more direct language, less variation in tone of voice, different facial expressions than what's expected, and different patterns of conversation. For example, while chatting or small talk is a common conversation pattern for neurotypical people, a lot of neurodivergent people struggle to follow the norms and cues that are common in small talk. They might instead opt for info-dumping conversations where there's less back and forth, and the conversation is more focused on sharing information about one specific topic. Some neurodivergent people who are non-speaking use alternative forms of communication, such as writing, gestures, or AAC devices. Because a lot of people aren't aware of these communication differences, neurodivergent people are often seen as rude or socially inept because they communicate differently. For example, neurodivergent kids are often told they're giving attitude or being disrespectful because of their tone of voice or facial expression, even when they don't mean to be. As we talked about earlier, neurodivergent people also struggle with reading in between the lines, which can be difficult to understand why someone is upset without being told directly. And this leads to miscommunications because while it externally seems like a neurodivergent child doesn't care they made someone upset, they simply might not know that the other person is upset. One way to avoid these misunderstandings is to speak directly with your child. Instead of relying on tone and implicit language, you can tell them your expectations and you can let them tell you their expectations before assuming their tone is purposefully disrespectful or negative. And there's a word for this communication barrier, and it's the double empathy problem, which applies to different kinds of neurodivergent people, or inter-neurodivergent people, not only neurotypical. This double empathy problem presents the idea that it's easier for neurodivergent people to communicate with other neurodivergent people than it is to communicate with neurotypical people, and vice versa. Essentially, it states that communicating across neurotypes is difficult. On the right side of the screen is a graph from a study that tested communication among neurotypical and neurodivergent participants. The results showed that communication was more effective among those communicating within one neurotype than for the group with mixed neurotypes. The problem is that neurodivergent people are generally seen as bad at communicating or socializing, and are expected to bridge the entire gap of conversation on their own, when that's like laying the burden on all of them. Like, as in group work, you always have to share the workload, share the responsibility. The best thing you can do is to solve this problem is to learn about the ways that neurodivergent people communicate. Instead of expecting neurodivergent people to mask and act neurotypical in social settings, try to understand how they express empathy and emotions. Say things directly instead of expecting them to read between the lines. Include them in conversation. Don't be afraid to ask clarifying questions.
Is it working? Okay, perfect, right. So, as we have already talked about, a lot of neurodivergent people are over-responsive or under-responsive to certain stimuli, and as a result, it can quickly lead to overstimulation or understimulation. Overstimulation is when there are too many stimuli to process at once. Understimulation is when there aren't enough stimuli to regulate or focus. Due to the fact that the self-regulatory processes of neurodivergent people are intertwined with sensory processing, overstimulation and understimulation can cause a lot of issues. They can cause fatigue, an irritable mood, an inability to function or focus, and more. Overstimulation can also cause responses as significant as vomiting, migraines, panic attacks, meltdowns, or shutdowns. To combat that issue, many people use tools like headphones, sunglasses, earplugs, and fidget toys. Those tools allow them to self-regulate by adjusting the amount of sensory information that they take in. At home, it is important for neurodivergent children to be able to adjust their sensory environment. Having a personalized space can be quite helpful, as they might be sensory avoidant towards certain things and sensory seeking towards others. Some examples of that might include changing into different clothes, turning the lights off, wearing headphones, listening to music, spinning in a chair, using a weighted blanket, etc. Remember that what works for a particular individual might not work for somebody else. Task paralysis is the physical inability for a person to perform a task, even if they force themselves to. While a person's brain might tell them to get up and go, it often feels like there's a physical barrier, like they are trapped within their body and unable to move. It is usually caused by overstimulation or being overwhelmed with options or information. Long instructions, many options, or demands are some common causes. Task paralysis is not laziness, procrastination, boredom, or disrespect. While it might externally look like somebody with task paralysis is sitting around doing nothing, their brain is fighting to start the task at hand. While something like procrastination is voluntary, task paralysis is involuntary. Although it is possible to circumvent task paralysis, it can often feel like tricking the brain or trying to find ways to let one's brain send the electrical impulses it wants. It can lead to frustration, guilt, and shame, mostly because it can feel like no matter how hard you try, you just cannot get work done. If your child experiences task paralysis, avoid attributing their behavior to laziness, as this is not the problem and can make them feel worse, essentially creating a negative feedback loop. Some things that can help are creating a calm and comfortable working environment, removing visual clutter, and creating written to-do lists. Starting with an easy task or something your child enjoys is useful, as this kickstarts the brain into action. Body doubling, where two people work while sitting alongside each other, can also be helpful in breaking task paralysis. Assignments that rely on verbal communication and auditory processing can make tasks much more difficult for neurodivergent students who may process auditory and sensory stimuli slower/differently than their neurotypical peers. Verbal assignments like discussions, presentations, etc. can be difficult due to social communication difficulties or differences, speech differences, and general executive functioning issues. For example, planning what to say, rehearsing it, and presenting it can be difficult and stressful. Neurodivergent students often need more time to process information, so they may need more time to understand directions or complete assignments and tests. Many neurodivergent students understand clear, direct instructions better than vague instructions with lots of implied meanings.
Or do you want to? Yes.
So, all the things that we've been talking about can have various impacts on assignments, homeworks, and tests, so we wanted to add some more examples here. So, communications, tics, stutters, and other behavioral differences. So, for example, if somebody needs to do a presentation for a class, can cause challenges with being able to fulfill rubric expectations. We have often discussed how a lot of rubrics for presentations, especially in language-based classes such as French or Spanish, oftentimes involve uses of tone as well as eye contact and different presentational speaking requirements that can vary from person to person, and even in some classes being assessed on how well you pay attention to others' presentations and display these listening behaviors. These all can be very much impacted by communicational differences, and as previously mentioned, things like tics and stutters can also make it quite difficult to be able to present, especially if you're presenting in front of a large group. Next, communicational differences, language skills, and the double empathy problem, as mentioned earlier, can cause difficulty in group assignments, collaborating with peers, as if you have communication across neurotypes, that can lead to miscommunication on expectations within the group and planning, and just even without that, just tension within a group based off of perceived rudeness. And dyslexia, dysgraphia, and disorganized speech can all contribute to difficulty with verbal or written assignments, depending, and difficulty with learning both reading and writing. And so some people with dysgraphia, for example, are able to receive accommodations that let them work on the computer and type instead of needing to write, but not everybody with dysgraphia is able to access these accommodations, so some then are required to functionally suffer through this for the sake of school. So this doesn't mean that these assignments should be just skipped for these students or avoided, but as mentioned with dysgraphia, and we will talk later about more different types of accommodations, it simply means that certain assignments might need to be reworked so that way they're able to be more inclusive of people with different neurotypes.
So, some neurodivergent people have difficulty processing information quickly than others, so they might need certain accommodations, but teachers may not understand why they need it, and so the neurodivergent students have to advocate for themselves in order to get their certain accommodations. Some include standing desks for students who prefer standing while working assignments. Another is extra time for students who haven't finished a test in the allotted time. And having accommodations doesn't mean a student is privileged or is cheating.
Okay, so through an IEP or individualized education plan, students can receive different types of support in school. So those usually take the form of accommodations, which are essentially any strategy that gets rid of or lessens the effects of barriers to learning. Sometimes it could be modifications as well. And 504 plans can also provide accommodations. And some accommodations are, as previously mentioned, like you can do extra time on tests, reference sheets on tests, just extra graph paper. Maybe you have an IA or instructional assistant in a class, and essentially these supports are changes that make learning accessible. And then some more examples of accommodations are preferential class seating, or usually sitting in the front row, wearing headphones or tinted glasses in class, written directions paired with verbal directions, moving breaks during class, and as mentioned before, extended time on assessments and tests, and breaking down complex tasks into steps. They don't accommodations. People often think that accommodations modify the curriculum, but they actually don't. They just make it more accessible to different types of students. So it's also important, our words matter when discussing neurodivergence and other related topics. So words like attention seeking should be replaced with connection seeking, low functioning with high support needs, high functioning with low support needs. Those two are especially important, I'd say. Obsessions with special interests, rigid with benefits from routine. And also if you don't know what to say or how someone identifies, it's important to ask. So some people might prefer autistic, some people might prefer has autism, and it is okay to say disability or disabled if that's what somebody prefers. So we have a QR code that you can scan with resources, club information, and the Q&A form.
So you can use the QR code, and that is the end of the presentation, but we are happy to take any questions that you all have for these awesome students.
Does anybody have any questions that they have? I have one sheet here somewhere. I'm wondering if Josh Apgar and Heather can join this group for the questions and answers.
I have a question. The information you gave was so well presented and very, very helpful. And I love the way you related it to your experience in the high school environment. It's so important and something that you don't get to hear about enough, I think. I'd love to hear examples from any of you of, especially I was thinking about the problem of the challenge of group presentations and group work in school. Are there accommodations that any of you have found really helpful and available to you?
Did everybody hear the question? The question was whether or not there's things that really help when you're faced with a group discussion assignment.
Yeah, group,
yeah. I'll speak to this because I recently had a very helpful example of this with my biology teacher, Mr. Barry. So part of that is a teacher kind of providing a more structured set of group roles, where Mr. Barry functionally provided us a checklist of things that need to get done and told us to divide the checklist amongst ourselves, where this kind of more set up structure of what needs to be done makes it a bit easier versus up to interpretation can make it a bit more difficult. I'd also like to mention that some people also prefer being able to do group work with people of their choice that maybe they know that they communicate well with.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, I remember last year in 8th grade, my science teacher made us students fill out forms of students who we'd like to work with and students we don't feel comfortable working with. And we're also allowed to say if we're not comfortable speaking out in front of the public, or yeah.
Thank you.
I think other ones that, from the other side of someone who often writes these accommodations, I think one that is often written is those specific roles. I think that is incredibly helpful. I think those forms that teachers do are so helpful. And then at the high school, and I think middle school has an equivalent called the win block, but a lot of teachers and students also utilize iBlocks to give smaller presentations or to find a group time together if it's hard to navigate doing that outside of school or if it's hard to present in front of a lot of people. So it's been really wonderful of how accommodating the school has been about that.
Yeah, last year in a lot of my classes, including like my English class, when there was like group work, you have like the option to like choose who you want to work with. I had my best friend was in that class, so that was nice. And sometimes and it's also nice to have the option to like work alone if you prefer that.
One of the submitted questions might be applicable to Josh and Heather. I forgot to have you introduce yourselves. You can do that too. This is a parent interested in how we can make middle and high schools more supportive of neurodivergent students. So you want to introduce yourselves?
Sure, here you go.
I get the hot potato. So I guess I mean, I'll start by saying just, my, so I'm Josh Apgar, I'm the parent of two neurospicy boys, Mac and Liam. That's what we like calling it, is neurospicy. And I'll say that, their experience in middle school and now in high school is sort of so different, I think, than my own. And I think one of the things that's pretty common among the parents of kids on the spectrum is they recognize a lot of things in themselves from when they're younger. And I think for many people sort of my age and older, you weren't diagnosed or you weren't really talked about it. And so it actually can be hard to identify some of these issues sometimes because you're like, oh yeah, that's just what kids do. And you're like, oh, it's not what all kids do. And so I think it just, seeing how caring the kids are with each other and that they sort of understand what this is and that they just sort of, it's just part of being, a kid, I think has been really wonderful. So I will give the school tremendous credit for that. I think that from very early on, I think part of the sort of, everyone belongs at Lexington includes neurodiversity. And so I think that's been really great. I think, one of the challenges I'll say, is that you could be more than one thing, and I think that's often hard in the kind of, in the space where you could be, autistic and dyslexic, or you could be autistic and an athlete, or, and so you tend to get a little bit, the sort of focus on supporting the sort of autistic part can sort of, make you very one-dimensional in that way, and I think that's sometimes hard. So our personal experience with dyslexia is that there's sort of a dyslexia screening program in Lexington, and there's a goal of getting every kid screened for dyslexia, but there wasn't set up initially in the ILP program, right? Because it's sort of the idea is those kids already have IEPs and have been evaluated for things, but and Liam, was also dyslexic, which we didn't, can be very hard to detect in someone who's also autistic. So I think that's one. It's just sort of that idea that, your sort of diagnosis is not all of who you are, and you're sort of multidimensional, and sort of just thinking about the things that, all kids get also includes the kids that are, getting all these special services as well. So, but I'd say by and large, I think I obviously I feel very privileged to be sending my kids to Lexington schools.
Hi, my name is Heather Konar. I'm here as a parent of 3 neurospicy children. I've got ADHD, dyslexia, and generalized anxiety going on in my house. And I actually can't really address the middle school and high school question. My kids are pretty young. They're in elementary school. They're actually at Estabrook. I think Estabrook has been doing a great job in really trying to work with kids of all flavors. They routinely, offer helps such as, like little privacy screens so kids aren't distracted by what's going on around them, and like lots of different things like that. They'll just, even if you don't have an IEP or 504, they'll offer these things to see if that helps. Like there's really a lot of that going on at Estabrook, which I love. I had another question for the students, but I want to give them the opportunity if they have thoughts at the middle school or high school level about how the environment can be more welcoming.
So, one thing that, especially with Mr. Redeker, we've discussed is a shift away from accommodations or speech therapists, especially, teaching behaviors of masking, and a shift away from, for example, teaching how somebody needs to sit up straight and to make eye contact, and how frequently, Mr. Redeker, I believe you mentioned, it used to be that making more eye contact was a goal on IEPs and 504 plans, and now the trend has kind of shifted away from that, more towards being able to be comfortable in the classroom and figuring out ways to advocate to teachers.
Yeah, and in some rubrics for some speaking assessments, body language was one of the criterias and included eye contact, not looking away or getting distracted, and being engaged with your body, not slouching or leaning forward. And I feel like and I feel like that's kind of unfair, because some people can struggle with eye contact and body language, and the school is working on taking those parts down.
If I'm gonna talk about like expectations and like, I have a flashback for it. So. Sure. Okay, so this is a flashback from when I was like younger, like much younger, and I'm just talking about like half as old as I am now. So so yeah, I was in elementary school. I was at Fisk, and I remember like this for every class I was like receiving support. I would get like I would have to fill out this. Me and my teacher would have to fill out like this like yes or no evaluation form with like 4 criteria. And yes, I remember all 4 of them. Did you keep your brain in the group? Did you listen to the teacher? Did you have quiet and empty hands? And did your answers match the teacher's answers? Well, so I remember like, I was just sitting in class, like, teacher would tell me brain in the group, or like listen to the teacher, or well, yeah, and then quiet hands, like sometimes when I'm like doing like any of the stimming behaviors like we mentioned earlier, and that kind of like became difficult. I was relieved when I found out I didn't have to do. I was like moving schools, I didn't have to do it anymore. I didn't know why at that time, but now I know. It's kind of like trying to like fix these like. Now that I reflect 9 years later, it's kind of felt like it was like they're trying to like fix these behaviors, and like how did they know I didn't have my brain in the group? Sometimes what's perceived as like not having, sometimes like trying to do it, but not necessarily displaying it.
I think at the high school and middle school level, I think just like Ryan has said and some of the other students, the reason a lot of these changes are happening and the reason all of these things are happening are because these students are telling us this information, because we're listening to autistic adults, we're talking to other students who are saying, hey, like this was hard for me, can we do it differently? And I think that is where a lot of the focus is happening with self-advocacy, whether that is advocating for this is the way I communicate, this is the way I listen, this is the way that I need help, or this is the way that back off, I don't need help. Those are really important skills, and I think we are really trying to focus on those things, and I think it's been really exciting to see the kids are really at the forefront of this, and it's been really heartening to see the district really listening to them and really valuing their voices, and even making events like this that really make these voices so valued. And I think it's amazing how much that they're able to share and reflect, and thanks for sharing that, Ryan. And I see Francesca, you might want to go, so go ahead.
So I know for me in middle school, it felt like I was alone. Like this, although like there were people who offered me support, it was like one person. And in high school, I felt much more supported, and like I'm not alone, and there are other people who have similar experiences.
Yeah, so I had an IEP for many years. I don't have one anymore. I now have what's called a DCAP, which is similar to a 504 plan. But I remember the process of getting off of an IEP required a lot of advocation, and the advocation I did shows that when one of the purposes of an IEP is to help students improve their self-advocation skills. So if they have those skills, then they can advocate to not have accommodations anymore, which is really awesome.
Yeah, big.
And we'd like to hear from a Lexington High graduate.
Sorry.
So no, it's okay. My name is Tali Rojam. I'm actually here as a community partner. I'm the Director of Innovation and Strategic Partnership for the Edinburgh Center. I'm also an alumni. I graduated in 1997, and this is probably going to be the most disjointed thing I've ever said, but I think it's important. When I was in 7th grade in Diamond Middle School, I was diagnosed with Tourette's and OCD, and at the time no one knew what to do with neurodiversity, so to speak. And I just want to say my experience was not the same as what's being described here, and I am so incredibly grateful to the town for making such wonderful changes. And I think it's wonderful that you have this and this is able to come here. So.
Thank you for sharing. Kate, did I interrupt somebody over there?
No.
Okay. All right, another question here is, what should a current 8th grade student know about starting LHS next year? I guess I'll ask the freshmen down there.
Or any of you guys go.
Any of you.
So, I would say, and a really important thing, and something I found as a distinction between middle school and high school, is that a lot more is dependent on the student, for better or worse, as in the student has a lot more control in who they may be able to access and the resources that they can get, but at the same time, they do also need to be a bit more proactive when it comes to seeking accommodations, communicating with teachers, where I found that in the past, more of that communication to teachers would happen with members of my IEP providers, and in LHS, it is now more on my part to speak with my teachers and inform them of my needs and my accommodations. So I'd say it's important to recognize, for better or for worse, that the student has a lot more power in high school than they do in middle school.
Anybody from the audience has a question?
I just want to say, just tell you who I am. I'm a speech language pathologist. I work in Wakefield with middle school students, and I wowould say 70% of my students have some sort of neurodiverse development. And the big question I have for all of you is the one of identity and of labeling. Because I know of people who are, for example, dyslexic, and they say, well, we shouldn't call them dyslexic, that's labeling them. And well, if you don't call them dyslexic, they're going to call themselves stupid. And so it comes down to how do you perceive, like I have students who are very proud of the fact, they'll come and say, I have autism, hey, I'm at a study at MGH on autism, they want to find out how my brain works. And they're quite proud of it and accepting. But there are others, and this really concerns me very deeply, who are being bullied because they have identified as on the spectrum. So my concern is what do you think? This is not how should we change the student, this is how should we change the system. How should we make the school? It really hurts me to know that, I don't feel that we're doing enough in any of our schools to make people who are neurodiverse feel welcome, accepting, and proud of who they are. And I just want to know if in your experience, that's kind of what I was hoping you might have some ideas along those lines, how we might make our systems more accepting and appreciative of yourselves.
I think for me, it's been a lot easier in high school, but it's still taken a lot of time to feel good about who I am and not feel ashamed, because people are very like white or black, and if you're somewhere in the middle, it's like there's no place for you and you don't make sense. So, but it's definitely been like better, and like I've found the right people to lean on and who are there to support me, and that's been like better and like boosting my confidence and like just embracing my identity.
Yeah, so for me, what's been important is finding community or people I relate to. So for me, it's been performing arts has just been really great for me, just to have a place where I can sort of, if I'm in a show, I can be someone else and just explore that. Or if I'm just in a chorus, it's just a place to be with other people who want to sing together, and that it just makes me feel really great inside. And I also just love music in general. Music sometimes just I feel as though music understands me more than people, if that makes sense.
I also wanted to mention that part of the goal with educating not just parents, but we also educate both teachers and students in this. We have worked to present to freshmen and juniors at Lexington High School, and we are currently making arrangements to go to the middle schools for presentations, as well as, at some point, I believe also, hopefully, the elementary schools. So, to the point about bullying, I think that many of us could say that at one point or another we have experienced some form of bullying, whether it be from identification labels or whether that just be from behaviors. In elementary school, for example, I did not know, sorry about that. That was my Prozac alarm. So yeah. So speaking of, in elementary school, I did not know that I had ADHD or generalized anxiety disorder or social pragmatic communication disorder, and that didn't stop me from being different from other students, right? Just because, and to your point, just because you don't put a label on features doesn't mean that anybody forgets about those features. It just means that they get labeled as stupid or weird. And just generally, what we've been trying to work on is helping provide those labels and talking about how those labels aren't a bad thing. Because if somebody is able to put a label to themselves and to others, oh, this facet of me is not just because I'm weird, it's because maybe I'm on the spectrum, or maybe I'm experiencing some form of neurodivergence. I think previous club member Cecilia put it really well when she was talking about how before she knew about autism and about ADHD and about their own neurodivergence, how they felt like they were just fundamentally wrong or didn't function properly. So I think a big piece of that is just raising awareness to people, especially at a young age, can help a lot with the bullying aspect, to just see other people as normal, even if they have different behaviors. So, yeah.
Although I've been in LHS for like, 3.5 months, I think, it still has helped me a lot more than when I was in Clark. And because there are a variety amount of clubs where I have the opportunity to try things that I've never done before until I find the right one. And it also helps me understand which clubs are meant for my brain and which clubs are not.
I just wanted to highlight what several of them said. I think I'm neurodivergent myself, and I think along with them, I think finding community and finding other people can be really, really helpful. When it comes to the identity piece of I think as a speech pathologist, I'm assuming you're coming from the, person with autism versus autistic, and it's seeming so many people really just see that individually, and I think that's why we put the part about ask. But I really appreciate what you said, Michael, that, these differences are here, regardless of, what words are used, and I think it can be really helpful to see other kids, other adults. We've had like neurodivergent staff day where staff have come seen the students in club and talk about it. I'll brag about Julia a little bit. She spoke to the entire 5th grade a few weeks ago. So I think education and community are the reasons why we're here, and I think hopefully systematically over time that will make a difference for these students as well.
Also, Mr. Redeker, speaking of, could we quickly just go to the previous slide in case, because we did go by that one kind of quickly. So also if anybody has any clarifying question on that, but Ryan, you wanted to say something?
Yeah, so I think in our school, like, we don't talk about autism. Is just like, and other new forms of neurodiversity are not talked about. Just not talked about enough. I think we should. I was in like, we should definitely in schools talk about Alan Turing as part of our curriculum, and the fact that he was most likely autistic. And when I was in my experience at the school, I've been trying to like blend in. I've been trying to like socialize with the neurotypical students, but through those kind of experiences, I also kind of realized I didn't really have time to like express like my own identity. Like, that opportunity just never popped up, and I feel like I've been in several clubs. I didn't have like the skills to like communicate with others. That was not until May when I found out about the Turing Alliance that I joined, and I found it as like my best like safe haven.
Yeah, I wanted to thank you guys for this wonderful presentation. I personally have strong feelings about not labeling, and that we're all, I mean, if you want to label, you could say the atypical are boring people, and the more neurodivergent are the geniuses and the Bill Gates and the creative, Einstein, and so I would like to think of, we all have different learning styles, and so I don't, you guys don't have the atypical, you don't have the typical learning style. But that's not your identity. Your identity is, Emma said, she's in the arts. You all have an identity. I think it's really wrong to get labeled by your learning style. There's 6 creative individuals up here, and I'd love to know what each of you are passionate about.
I would like to mention that a lot of us, firstly, just while these different conditions that we've talked about can have varying impacts on school life, something that we didn't necessarily talk as much about in the slideshow, for lack of a better term due to irrelevancy, is how things like autism, ADHD, other forms of neurodivergence can be really impactful to one's identity outside of school and outside of learning. So, as Francesca briefly touched on, things like hyperfixations or special interests can be of large import. So, for me personally, since I was a very small kid, I've always had a large interest in Pokemon, and I know that I assume that at least a few of you in the audience know the same. So, stuff like that, of course, being interested in dramatic arts, and some interested in visual arts, and just generally how much impact somebody's interests and have on their identity, and how much neurodivergence can impact one's interests, to the extent of, a very good example is actually the dramatic arts, how being able to be somebody else and to kind of act as this role is very important, and that key facet of enjoyment in it is directly tied to neurodivergence in a way, if I understood correctly.
Yes, correct, yeah.
So even if autism and ADHD, OCD, dyslexia, dysgraphia, dyscalculia, even if they are not the entirety of the identities, and we do not want them to be the entirety of our identities, they have such a big impact on our lives, even outside of school, just in the way that we live, that they kind of become fundamental to who we are as much as what our interests are.
Yeah, I mean, I think this is obviously it's a really tricky question, and I think, it's also as someone who sort of grew up without those labels, and I think it's not like the behaviors weren't there, and so if you sort of think about what the purpose of things are, and giving a group or a name, some level they're kind of a cognitive shorthand that makes them easier to think about, right? And that comes with pros and cons, right? Because that allows you to stereotype, because you can start to say everything with this name is kind of the same, but also can make it easier to think of, where you say like, oh, he's autistic and he's having a meltdown, and that, and I kind of know how to think about that, and it puts it in a framework, and I could sort of understand that, right? And so it can also lead to that sort of understanding in the same way that it can also lead to stereotyping. And I think that's why there's no real simple answer to that, right? Because, I know that, this idea that the labels stigmatize people, but that's almost sort of inherent in saying that we're sort of in that space where we're sort of stereotyping, right? As opposed to where people are seeking to understand that having those labels can be a very good key into understanding someone, and can help you know how to approach them and what questions to ask and how to understand them better. And so I think it really depends on the cultural context as to whether this is going to be a good thing or a bad thing, right? And I'd say, for a lot of these things about, sort of being, masking or not masking is sort of another one I know is a very controversial topic, and a lot of that depends on whether you're someplace where it's sort of safe and accepted to not mask, right? And I think one of the things we enjoy in Lexington is that we're really encouraged to do that, but I think it's also, I don't think, for people who are not in those situations, and I think it's still not true that all jobs and all, places, will be as accepting, and so, I think there's sometimes where masking is a survival skill that you just have to do, right? And that's not that it's a good or bad thing, but it's the reality of that situation. And so I think that's why these are sort of very nuanced topics, in terms of, it's so situational as to whether this is a good thing or not.
I had a question, yeah. So this is going to be a super short story. In the beginning of my working career, I collaborated with a woman, and we would get into these like cool conversations about our work, and I would sit there and I would kind of, twirl my hair as I was framing my answer, and she asked me very specifically to stop doing that. I said, oh, but I do it when I'm thinking, and she's like, but when you do that, I stop thinking. So she was very distracted by my movements, and I kind of wanted to open up a question for the room, because if we recognize that a lot of people need to move their bodies in order to listen or to think, how can what are some strategies that neurotypical people can use? This is a question for the whole room. What are some strategies that neurotypical people can use to cope with that? Or to be in conversation with people who might be distracting to their style? Like, who has thoughts?
Don't look directly at him, you won't notice.
Don't look directly at him. Any other thoughts?
I think maybe like both neurotypical people and neurodivergent people can maybe share about like what they feel comfortable with and what they don't feel comfortable with. So some neurodivergent and neurotypical people will understand each other better, and they may find some common ground too.
Maybe we can hide our tics from neurotypical people. Like don't show them that we're moving our legs.
And that's masking.
Oh, sorry.
it's important to bring that up because it's expected. It is expected to hide those behaviors or to stop those behaviors in classrooms, in public, everywhere. Oops. Yeah, I think it's an important thing to bring up. Just as you brought up, she told you to stop. And whose need is important, right? How do you figure that out? But certainly in classrooms, over and over and over again, I know I've gotten feedback from teachers. This is happening, it's distracting in the classroom. Your child is doing this behavior or that behavior. What about my kid? Maybe my kid needs to do that behavior. Where's the room for that? Is there room for that? And how do you organize a classroom or life? I don't have the answer, but I think they're important things to discuss.
If I may say something, I want to bring up a personal anecdote with a close friend of mine who is also neurodivergent, because I want to highlight that this is not just a situation of neurotypical versus neurodivergent. For example, oftentimes I will absentmindedly be cracking my knuckles, and the friend who I speak to very frequently can find this very distressing at times, and has personally spoken about a condition that we didn't really get much into, but it's called misophonia. Have you ever heard of it? Mm-hmm. So, talking about different ways in which we can work together on this, and for example, for myself, finding different methods of stimming that don't involve creating noise can be very helpful for this individual. So, for example, I can just be tapping my thumb, and that doesn't make much noise, if at all, versus cracking my knuckles, which can be significantly louder. So, kind of open communication in this case, and the fact that stimming is not a one-size-fits-all, so there's a lot of different ways that people can cooperate.
I think I would second what Michael said, and I'm going to say an example of yesterday, where this is something that happens often in Turing Alliance. There are different sensory needs that don't always agree with each other. This is something that is coming up all the time. So for example, they're all going to yell at me. I'm not a huge musical fan. We all have flaws. I'm sorry. I walked into Turing Alliance yesterday. I was a few minutes late. That's my ADHD. And Defying Gravity was happening at a very loud, very loud, right, way. And there were a lot of students in the room who were so into it. I know, I'm looking at these two. You know, no part of me as an educator wants to diminish that joy and their defying gravity, and you know, it's great and wonderful.
It was not defying gravity, it was like
See, I clearly know nothing. But regardless.
What is this feeling?
What is this feeling?
It's better, guys.
It's better? Okay. I think, again, just like Michael said, I think this is an opportunity where there's communication, right? I think that was where I walked in and I said, love this, but let's turn it down just a little bit. Let's turn it down just a little. You know, so things like that happen often, and there have been a lot of moments during club where kids are like, if you say make that sound one more time, I'm gonna lose it. And what the outcome is trying to find a toolbox of ways to regulate. So maybe the hair twirl doesn't work for one person, but maybe you have another way to regulate. So whether it's a physical toolbox, as in you have fidgets on deck, you know, or it's you have a few things that you know are calming. We all have to compromise in life. That's just part of reality, and that's part of the balance of being in a school, absolutely. Every student deserves to have the right to education, deserves to be able to pay attention. So I think that's where, as educators and as students, we have to get creative and compromise, and again, that's part of that self-advocacy and communication. And I think the more open we can be about those things, the easier those moments become. But some of that takes time. Sometimes you might only have one thing that you recognize that you do that you like. So a lot of it does fall on the student or the neurodivergent person, and you know, that can be difficult, but there are ways to have multiple ways to regulate. And then another piece that we haven't really talked about very much is co-regulation. There are a lot of ways to regulate together. Often we think about it from a mental health perspective of breath work, right? But it can even be, I don't have my computer, but we have an unofficial Turing Alliance theme song that a bunch of us just kind of like to bounce to, right? So it can be all sorts of things that can be regulating, but all of these things aside, accommodations that are used need to be respectful of everyone regardless. Regardless of disability, neurodivergence, whatever. But it's building the toolbox. I think that's important.
I just wanted to make a comment. One, every time I see this presentation, I cry. But so I'm going to cry for a second. But I also think that we can learn so much from you guys in how to regulate ourselves. Going back to this co-regulation, is that I have a child who has learned how to co-regulate, and now whenever he sees me getting all fidgety or stressed or anything, knows how to teach me how to breathe. And hey, do you need a moment? What do you need now? And that kind of thing. So being willing to do that. And the big thing for what we'll be here for is because we do want to open up the communication. We do want us to be able to have these conversations and sit and work together and destigmatize. But I also had a question. I had a statement question. As a parent, these kids have learned how to advocate for themselves, but how do you, with your younger children, work with them to advocate? You may not be there yet in some ways, but in other ways, what would you recommend for those around here?
So, I mean, I think some of the very first building blocks are wrapping words around things. So, you know, whatever your feelings about labels, being able to verbalize something is the first step to being able to handle it, regulate it, whatever you need to do with it. So it's putting labels on feelings, it's wrapping words around what's going on, it's naming the stressor, it's you know, just talking about it as much as you possibly can. And I feel like I'm doing something right in my house when I hear my children bickering with each other, but they take the time to explain why they're frustrated. And I'm like, okay, we can work with this. We can still have the conversation. And so being able to talk about it is that first building block that we're working on in my house towards advocacy.
Yeah, I mean, I would agree with that. I think the other is like, I think there's no sort of special answer to that any more than like, I think if you have a neurotypical kid, they have all the same sort of, challenges in how they advocate for themselves and their peer groups and their teachers, and, do they have that sort of sense of self to sort of stand up for things when they aren't right. And I think that sort of a lot of that is that sort of feeling like they're not broken, like that, what they need is as important as anyone else, right? And I think also that, their needs aren't more important than everyone else's either, right? And that's that sense of being part of a community, and so, and I agree. So, I've got, just as an example, two sons who are on the autism spectrum. One is very sensory seeking, one is very sensory averse, right? And so a lot of times they butt heads around the volume of the TV or how rough they're wrestling or, whatever the thing is, and so it's so, but and so it's sort of like that microcosm of like they have to sort of find the thing that works for both of them, and so I think it's sort of like with all of those things, it's similar with, with us and the kids in terms of, how much, are they sort of deciding versus we're deciding? When is it the parent could just say, because I said so, versus when you actually have to convince them. And so I think it's in all of those sort of small things of sort of that they have a voice, that they sort of feel like that voice is important, and also that, that they're aware of the other voices in the room as well.
I just wanted to say, so much of the diagnosis or identification of a neurodivergent is based on some kind of checklist. What does that mean? It means observable behaviors. But in reality, the person themselves is internalizing, experiencing all sorts of thoughts and feelings that we cannot have access to. Only that person does. But what I mean to say is I did meet this woman. She is a PhD, university professor, Boston University professor, but she freely identifies herself as autistic. But what she's saying is she's had a very hard time convincing other people that she is autistic because the traits are not so observable. But in fact, they're very significant. Like she, was going to have a baby and she needed her gynecologist to understand, hey, I experience sensory things differently. You need to know this about me. So my point being that I think these young people are aware that it's not self-advocating for teachers, but through their lives, they're going to have to be able to help other people understand who they are in order to get their own needs met. This lady wrote up her brochure, I'm autistic and this is what this means. Let me help you understand. Because there will be so many well-intentioned people who will not understand and will need your help in understanding. And so all the best with that.
I do see that we have a question in the back. I just wanted to quickly also mention, to that point about, we mentioned earlier with masking, how that can be difficult to have people understand that one experience certain struggles, but I believe we touched on this briefly, but up there you might see how we have low functioning and high functioning replaced with high support needs and low support needs. And that was kind of to a point that oftentimes we can see that there might be somebody who does experience a lot of struggle in their life and might not, in their own words, be able to function as well as they would like to, but nonetheless, they do not necessarily need as much support from outside sources so much as various sources like therapy, medication, and versus sources from other people. And in the same way, you can have somebody who is dealing with not that many struggles in their own way and is able to, in their own words, function quite well, yet they might still need a lot of support from their environment, such as somebody who has a lot of sensory regulation differences and might need changes in lights, in sounds, and things like that. So part of why we had vocabulary changes on here was to highlight that the way that somebody appears to be can be very different from how you can support them. Yeah. But we did have a question at the back, I believe.
Yeah, I was going to actually ask in relationship to that in school, if you're being more out in your classroom and with your schoolmates, how does this affect you with them, and also with either high masking or not being able to mask those situations? And then how does it affect you with your teachers? Like, are you communicating with your teachers, and do you feel that there's a give and take when you talk to them about that?
Me personally, for me, it's really easy now. With my teachers and my friends, I'm very, goofy and, kind of always hyper, so they know, you're not normal. But we're okay with that. We're okay with that, and we support you. And my teachers, they like that about me because it makes me outgoing and just, gives me my, vibrant personality. Yeah.
Francesca, humblest of the group, as we can see.
I'm going to have to move on to the next part. It's been wonderful having you guys here. I feel like Stephanie, I want to cry. But, thank you for sharing so much. I think you all are stigma busters. I really do. And it is what works to help people understand what's going on. So
We do have another part of the program that's pretty important. We wanted to talk about some of the resources in Lexington. We have a number of people from different places. It's going to be kind of a lightning round of introductions. But I think I'm going to first ask Cade if you could talk about what the special services are in school, like the shack, some of the special ed.
Sure.
Yeah.
Right. Thank you very much.
I'm going to have to rush you all along, so.
That's okay.
Talk.
I'm a speech therapist, so I can't speak to everything or everyone. First I'll talk about the shack. The Student Health Advisory Council is something that, sorry, some of our students have to go. We have a shack about neurodiversity, so a Student Health Advisory Council that students are involved in, parents, educators, community members, to talk about neurodivergence at the town level, the district level. We focus a lot on the high school just because we have these amazing kids. But again, the kids themselves are also saying, you know, we want to talk to and focus on younger students as well. So that is available, and that is something that anyone and everyone can join. Again, I can only speak to the high school, but the special education program is tiered into different programs. So we have the ILP, which is the Individualized Learning Program. Students in ILP 1 would have low support needs, and ILP 3 would have high support needs. We also have the Developmental Learning Program, or DLP, and we have TLP, the Therapeutic Learning Program, LLP, the Language Learning Program. We also have students who access Resource, which is a class that is focused on executive functioning and homework help, and a lot of that self-advocacy and independent work. I can speak a little bit more to the high school, but a lot of students who receive services may just receive speech therapy, might just be coming to see me or one of the other 5 speech therapists in the district. They might access speech, OT, PT, executive functioning help, social work, movement and orientation help, physical therapy. There are all sorts of things that are available, and just like I tell all the kids, IEP stands for individualized because everyone has different needs, every IEP looks different, we are a giant high school, but there is a lot of different support and a lot of options for your students. But I don't think I can answer everything, I'm sorry.
No, that's good, thank you. And we also have, Stephanie's going to share about unified basketball.
They weren't able to be here tonight, but wanted me to just share a little bit about the Unified Basketball team, which is through Lexington High School, and it joins students with and without intellectual disabilities on the same team. And it was inspired by a central principle of training together and playing together, the path to friendship and understanding. So you can find them, you just have to Google them, but we'll have a link to their site on our websites.
Unified Basketball is the coolest program ever. If your kid is interested, do it. It is amazing. Just want to plug it. It is amazing. Amazing.
Is that just for Lexington?
It's lots of different towns. Our team is Lexington, but I want to say they play like Melrose, Wakefield, Belmont, Watertown. So there's all sorts of programs. Right now we have basketball, but I think there have been other options in the past, and as well as the Special Olympics.
Yeah, and the coach does specialized programs individually, like you can do coaching with them.
Yes, Coach Brinklow from Lab is absolutely amazing. Absolutely amazing.
And we also have John here from Lexington Youth Counseling Connection.
Actually, he had to leave, so it's me again. We have the Lexington Youth Counseling Network that I didn't know about. And I got it. Thank you, though. I didn't know about until last spring, and I think it's a wonderful thing. It offers weekly drop-in and short-term counseling to families with youth ages 11 to 22. It's confidential. and it can be provided to both youth or family. I have some brochures for that. It's a great way. The students are very involved in it as well, and it's a really great resource that we have.
And also we have our own Director of Human Services here and several staff that can talk about what is offered within the community center. So this is Penny and Dana.
We also have Juanita here too, who's over here. I'm Penny, I'm the Youth and Family Services Manager. I'm one of the social workers for the Human Services Department. Dana is our director. We're housed in this building. So we're a town department. Any resident can access us. It's a free resource. My division, I see anyone under 60. Juanita can see anybody across the lifespan, so we do encompass everybody. We have senior services, veteran services, kind of everybody. But we're housed here, available by appointment. Depends on what day. There's a bunch of different things that we're doing. Very involved in the community. We offer short-term counseling. We can do case management for folks. I think the biggest thing that we're doing is like just connecting people to resources. So if you're needing any sort of support, mental health, behavioral health, don't know where to start looking for something, contact us. We would be more than happy to meet and help you kind of navigate those things that you're, facing, challenges. We also have recreation department in the building as well, and they offer programs year round. Kate DeAngelis couldn't be here tonight, but she's our therapeutic recreation specialist, and she's able to offer like all-inclusive programming, and she has a robust, incredible staff. So anyone of all abilities can do pretty much any of our programming that we offer, as long as she can staff it. And the last thing that I will talk about is I feel like the community center we're always expanding and trying to add new things, but one thing that I did want to mention that we do have here, again, Kate, I wish she was here to talk about it because it was her project and she did such an amazing job. We have a sensory room in the community center now. So if anyone has used this building or hasn't used this building, behind the billiards room, which is right across from the front desk, there's like a kids game room, but then there's also a separate room. There wasn't really much use for it. It was kind of like you could go in there too, gaming, but she actually transformed it into a sensory room. Still, I think every time I go in there, there's new things added and changed, but it's really cool and a really great resource. So if anyone's ever in the building and needs a minute and needs to take the space, you don't need to reserve the room or anything. You can just come and use it as you want. So that is one thing I wanted to mention.
Can you talk about your connection with Edinburgh and
Yeah, I can have Dana.
Yeah. Oh, I was gonna mention, yeah, absolutely. Can I ask a real quick question?
Yeah.
Is Kate still doing the counselor and training program or the CIT?
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
And that's for kids of all.
Yeah. Yep.
Typical and neurodiverse.
Yep.
Yeah.
I also wanted to make one plug for our transportation department as well, and at some point, Kate, I think we're going to get in touch with you and Julie Fenn, because Susan Barrett, our transportation manager, and Mel Novner, our transportation assistant, they really do like a holistic transportation kind of plan with people, and I think travel training is a really important skill that is not usually talked about and missed. So she's gone into schools before and would be willing to talk to the Turing Alliance if you were interested, because it's a good life skill to have. And then we also wanted to talk about our partnership with the Edinburgh. They started back in September, and thanks to ARPA funding, we have a full-time mental health clinician who can see people of all ages, no cost, and it's a really nice benefit. So if you're interested in seeing a clinician, you can get in touch with me, and it's another great partnership that we have. So.
Do you guys have anything else you want to add while we're here?
While the Edinburgh is here?
We're thrilled to be able to support the community, and if there are any resources, whether they're internal to Edinburgh or we can point people in the right direction to external resources for needs. We have, I think, a very inclusive, it's an inclusive organization, and really working hard to support people who are neurodiverse in unique ways by infusing mental health and maybe the principles of ABA and working together in this better together model and looking at the whole person, occupational therapy as well. So, I mean, very happy, you know, if anybody needs help with systems navigation, I'm happy to, my card's here, but Dana or Penny could also connect you to me, and I would be very happy to just help as a community partner.
Oh, I have one kid who took the Edinburgh service, ABA at home service. That was actually very helpful. That my kid was maybe 4 years old, and he was not able to function to go to the regular daycare. And Edinburgh service actually offered ABA service at home. That's at that moment that was very helpful to my kid. I want to thank them.
Thank you. And I heard something at the very beginning of this about this is kind of a plug for the state, not for Edinburgh by any means, but I know there is a huge gap and need for services for neurodiversity at 22, and the state has, Lily is actually our program director for this team. It's intensive community wraparound. Did I get that right? We call it ICWA. It's terrible, I'm sorry. But it is a marriage between the Department of Mental Health and the Department of Developmental Services, serving individuals ages 18 to 30 in the community with behavior therapists, mental health clinicians, essentially adopting the Edinburgh model of this better together, coaches, peer support, so the people with lived experience navigating a similar challenge. Is there anything else on that team that I'm missing?
No, I don't think so. It's a real wraparound team.
Yeah, so
we can support people from all angles and focus on person-centered goals.
It is something that's considered closed referral, so you do have to have either services with the Department of Developmental Disability or the Department of Mental Health, but I just wanted to say that the state is changing its landscape to be more inclusive to a population where I know there's almost nothing for 18 to 22, and it's a challenge. So.
Thank you. I also wanted to call on somebody from LexSEPTA. Maybe you can introduce yourself and talk a little bit about it.
Sure. Hi everyone. Faye and I are co-chairs, 2 of the 3 co-chairs of Lexington Special Education Parent Teacher Association and Lexington Special Education Parent Advisory Council. We are a 2-body entity, and we're co-chairs for both. As part of the PTA, we work with our parent community, provide all forms of support. We have school for different diagnosis support group leads who work with parents in the community, have support group meetings, dinner events where we can, meet parents who have already gone through the process with the school or have had kids of similar backgrounds, form some kind of a community within Lexington where they can relate to their experiences, family backgrounds, kids, and just grow together. And then as part of PTA, we also have liaisons. So we have parent liaisons who can work with the school. So for every school, every elementary school, middle school, and high school, we have liaisons who work very closely with the ETS coordinators. So they form this bridge between the special education families and the school. So if you have we have used our liaisons to bring up neurodivergent events in the school, something like collaborating with the local PTO to have talent shows where we could have neurodivergent participation, or have science fair where there is more inclusive representation, accommodations for our kids to participate in science, right? So this is from the PTA side. On the CPAC side, do you want to talk about it, please?
Yeah, sure. So from the CPAC side, we basically meet with Dr. Ackett
on a quarterly basis. We also meet with the special ed director on a monthly basis, and we basically advocate for our families on different policy issues, system changes that we see, such as like in curriculum, or just equity issues, out-of-district placement issues, things that any families will actually bring to us. So we are happy to advocate, on those fronts. And I just want to just take the opportunity just to thank the Turing Alliance. You guys are amazing. We as parents, we get to advocate, right, with the adults, right? But I actually think you guys are better advocates for yourselves and for, our kids. So we both have elementary school kids. And I'm just so impressed and inspired by you guys. So, and I hope that you guys have a forum where, and we can probably set it up.
Yeah.
To be honest, right? In front of the entire administration, and also with the school committee, and as well as with just teachers, all the educators. I think your insights on your lived experiences in the public school system is so invaluable. It's more than what we could say. So, I hope to just work with you guys and see if we can set something up. Okay?
Plus one to everything that Faye said, but I was also very inspired to learn that one of you had presented in front of 5th graders. So I would really love if we actually get you all in front of the elementary schools as well to talk about your experience, because this is firsthand. We parents can only go so far to advocate for our kids, but this is right from you guys, and I think it's invaluable. And I got emotional at many times during this presentation this evening, and I really hope and dream that this camaraderie, this strength grows and grows into the entire population across the state, everywhere. This is something really remarkable, and I think you all deserve a big round of applause for doing this. Thank you so much.
Thank you. We also have somebody here from LexArt.
Hi everybody. We're from LexArt, which is right going into the center. It's the building. You can't miss it right now. There's a giant horse covered in lights in front of it. It's less than a 5-minute walk from LHS. We encourage everyone to stop by. We're a local community arts center and nonprofit. And in addition to our gallery space, we have several equipped studios where you can take a class or just, create in a studio, woodworking, weaving, ceramics, needle arts. I could go on and on. But we wanted to talk just quickly about one of our many offerings, which is our Molesky series classes. These classes were started by one of the members of our woodworking studio. He used the wood shop in the final years of his life after a cancer diagnosis as therapy, and we love to have ourselves as a therapeutic resource for the town of Lexington. And Chia Molesky, his widow, has been wonderful in starting the Molesky Fund, which led to some things, including the Molesky classes. And Paula, would you like to, do you want to do it?
I'll try.
Okay,
Yeah,
so Paula's our woodworking studio manager, and he can tell you a little bit about the classes.
So the idea was, I taught woodworking for years and decided that I wanted to have a class for neurodivergence. Basically a place where there would be no judgment, people could be more relaxed and kind of figure it out. And it's kind of grown over time. When we started, it was just an idea, which was great because it allowed me to run with it. And what we found was smaller classes, longer periods to work, more time to sit and talk, less distractions, and it kind of evolved from just being neurodivergent to being universal access. And every time we run up against an issue with access and we do something to modify our space, it benefits everybody. So we had a jig that was only made for right-handed people. We switched it over so it could be used for left hand and right hand, and then all of a sudden we realized it could be used for Western saws and Asian saws, and this kind of, we just kept running into this. So it's been a mission to do universal access. My inspiration is I got the triple crown: autism, ADD, and dyslexia.
And Paula does a wonderful job, might I add, just by, we have so many neurodivergent people, but also neurodivergent teens who, take the Molesky classes and get involved, and they all really admire Paula. I say that because it's just, they see him, with his headphones on and being so open and talking about being neurodivergent, and they sing his praises to me constantly, like a lot.
And we have members, so we have the classes and then membership, so people become like year-long members and come in and use the studio. So we have somebody from coding school, we have other people who come in under the Molesky and joined us, and we do support both financially and also transportation, depending on the situation.
Yeah, so definitely feel free. You can check us out at lexart.org. You can get in contact with me or Paul or anyone on the staff, and we try to accommodate everyone as best we can. Thank you.
So I'm looking at the time here and trying to rush ahead. We have LPD of the Lexington Police Department.
I also was going to mention Cary Library is also
Cary Library.
Cary Library is also here. I don't know if they want to speak or not, but there's a list of some book lists back there that they put together, and then we're going to get to the highlight of our because we all want to see your dogs.
Hi, I'm Melissa Lozon. I'm the head of youth services at Cary Library, joined tonight by Michelle Teckler, who's our teen services manager. We do have some book lists that we created that are in the back. Obviously, we're the library, so we provide access to books, resources. That includes windows and mirrors and sliding glass doors books, as well as books that are resources if you're looking for more information. Books in a variety of formats, so large print, ebooks, audiobooks, e-audiobooks, so whatever format works for you as a reader. We also have books that are decodable books, so for kids who are dyslexic and struggling to learn how to read, we have decodable books. We offer a wide variety of programs. If you need assistance in order to attend one of our programs, whether that's you would like us to provide you with some fidgets, you want to come to one of our concerts, but you could use a pair of noise-canceling headphones in order for that to be successful for you, we have those tools as well. If you visit the library and it's a little overstimulating for you, we also have those tools available at the desk. You can just ask at the desk in the youth services department when it reopens and we're no longer under construction next year.
Thank you. So, and we also have the Lexington Police Department here, and I think that maybe Maisie and Watson are here, but I think you've been keeping them out of my sight so I wouldn't get distracted. Are they here?
They're here.
Sure. So we have some emotional support dogs that are part of the Lexington Police Department now. I don't know what to say.
So I'm going to let Christina and Joe talk because I can't, my voice is just coming back now. But these are our school resource officers, and Maisie and Watson are our school resource community engagement dogs that we have. So you guys want to give a little talk about it? Sorry.
Just want to preface this by saying you guys did an excellent job presenting today, and I learned a lot personally, and I really appreciate you guys sharing all that with us. I'm Joe Sullivan. I'm one of the school resource officers in Lexington, primarily in the middle schools, and my partner here is Maisie. She is 11 months old, and we've had her since she was 8 weeks old. Instantaneously had her in the schools at 8 weeks, getting socialized, being around groups of people, kids of all ages, and they've been a huge asset to us in the community.
Hi everyone, Christina Hankins, School Resource Officer, primarily assigned to the high school, but I'm everywhere. Joe and I also share the middle schools. So just to piggyback off of what Joe said, they're dual purpose dogs, so they're in the schools daily, Monday through Friday, and also in various community events. You can invite them anywhere, we're more than willing to come out. In addition to that, they're also being trained in friendly fine tracking, so they'll be able to assist if we have a member of the community with an altered mental status or a kiddo with autism that may take off, they can be used and assist in helping track and do a friendly fine. And they're always around, so feel free to stop by and say hello.
We also have some trading cards that we make. Usually it's like a seasonal card that we make with their pictures on it, a little bit of information about them. So we can put some in the back, and if you want to learn a little bit more, there's a little bit more information on the back. So we'll leave those in the back, and feel free to take one before you go.
Yes, the puppies are definitely past their bedtime, but everyone's sure they'll be able to say hi to everyone. I also wanted to introduce Caitlin Fisher. She is our co-response clinician. We share her with 3 other communities as part of a grant. So we have her 2 days a week. We would love to get her for 5. We're trying to work on that, but the state's out of funding right now apparently. So we're on standby. But she is with the police department, so if there's anything that she can assist with, any calls for assistance, then she's available and she helps out the officers as well. So she's a great resource for us to have. And also I just wanted to shout out the Turing Alliance. You guys helped us with our blue envelope project last year. The collaborative reform I was explaining to them that we were joining the blue envelope program, which for the state they were saying it was for people on the autism spectrum that they were doing it. The Turing Alliance said, wait a second, it should be for anyone with neurodivergent. So we actually tailored our envelopes to match with what you guys recommended for us. So thank you very much, and we have all these available, so feel free to grab some.
Do people know what that is?
So for anyone who doesn't know what the blue envelope is, you put this in your car with your license and registration in your envelope, so that if you are pulled over by a police officer or have an interaction with a police officer, they see this envelope and they recognize that, I'm dealing with somebody who might not display the same mannerisms that one would expect in a traffic stop. So this instantly gives the officer awareness that, okay, maybe they have trouble making eye contact, or maybe they have trouble communicating. So it's a great resource for the officers to be aware immediately, so they see on a traffic stop and they're able to understand why they might be acting, what the typical traffic stop usually is like. So it's a great
I have
awareness.
a question about that. If you have someone in your vehicle as a passenger who has autism or is neurodivergent, can you use that as well? So for instance, if you get pulled over and me as a driver, if I have an autistic passenger who may act erratically, that could alarm. Is it only for the driver, the blue envelope program, or could it be for anyone?
No, you can put
like a parent could have it.
Yep, and actually ours, we have contact information too, so in case we have someone that needs the information, but absolutely, if you think that would assist, you can definitely do that.
I was just curious.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think anytime that any extra information we have is only helpful.
Can you mention one more thing? The people can file that information about, what is it called now?
So the Safe Watch program.
Yes.
So we have the Safe Watch program at the police department, and this is all available online. We have a lot of information on our website. But the Safe Watch program is, you can pre-register. Say you have someone, either it's an elderly person with dementia that may tend to wander, a neurodivergent child that may be attracted to different locations. So that what it does, it gives us a head start, so that if someone is missing or we're looking for someone, we have the information, we have their information, their photo, everything, and the officers can pull that up on their laptop in all their cruisers. So it saves a lot of time, and it gives a lot of information that we'll be able to find, rather than trying to go to your house and then find and then get a picture and then be able to send it out to everyone. It really helps the police department narrow the time down and be able to go immediately to some of these locations if someone is missing.
I was just going to say, it's also really important for those of you that have people who have some neurodivergency or any disability to also stop by the police station and get to know them. Let them see what it's about and what it's like. They're awesome. So, and I just.
Yeah, we do, yeah, we're welcome tours, especially I know people want to see the new station. Reach out and we have no problem, you know, bringing you through, and someone, a neurodivergent child, if they want to come see the police cars, and we would love to do that tour. And our school resource officers and our community resource detective will help, definitely help set that up.
The more comfortable we are with the police, the safer we all feel, and our kids who are on the spectrum or neurodivergent in any way. They're good.
And the police department is involved with the collaborative reform group as part of our members. And we were working hard to get Caitlin, and now we're going to try to keep working hard to get her more. But if there are any people that are interested in those kinds of things, then the issues we discuss around neurodiversity and different issues with disability and human rights, please join the collaborative reform group.
Can I also say an underutilized group in Lexington is the Commission on Disability. So it's for all ages. It's not just for, you know, people who are outside of the school district. It's for all of us, and it's a great resource also for parents.
Yes, the Commission on Disability, I'm the chair for that, does handle complaints about neurodivergent issues, any kind of issue. Well, lots of school issues come to us. So. Yeah. So.
There are a lot of
Am I
resources.
missing other people?
Yeah, I was going to say, there are a lot of resources that are out there in Lexington. There's the SNAP art program.
In course.
I'm sorry?
In course.
In chorus, yep. There's a Fuse program, which is for preschool students. That's social wellness and socialization. It's awesome. We did that at one point. So there are a lot of other resources.
I guess we're ready to wrap up. There's so many people to thank. I don't even know where to start. So I want to thank all the people that came out from the different places. I really want to thank the Turing Alliance again. I think that any peers spreading information is a really powerful thing, and it needs to continue. You guys did great job. Also wanted to thank the Lexington Human Services, Human Rights Committee, the Police Department, our student volunteers, Hayden and Nahashi. Thank you for our panelists, Heather and Josh. And we had many community co-sponsors like LexSEPTA, Lexington Youth Counseling Network, Cary Library, ABCL, CA Lex, Cal, IAL, IPL, these are a lot of letters, JP Lex, CoLex, LUAA, Lex Pride, LICA, NLCC, Lexington Arts and Crafts Society. We also really wanted to thank LexMedia for making this possible. So I just have one more question. Are people interested in having this be a series to have more conversations like this?
Yes.
Absolutely. Yes. Okay. All right, well, that's what we're planning to do. Thank you for coming.
Oh yeah, turn it off. Okay, hold on, Larry.
For like 5 minutes, just serotonin, like end your day with